I've come live, but it's Friday and this is a perfect opportunity. I want to talk about something really controversial as there's so many in the sales space that can't stop talking about how AI is prevalent, it's here, and it's going to be part and parcel with our workflow. And if you're not learning this in the next 12 to 18 months, you're not going to make it. This is a perfect history lesson. When I was 32, and I started social selling, I thought the world that I was living, everything revolved around the pace and the speed at which I was learning things. And I remember those that are my age now, they're 45 or 50, and they'd been in sales a long time and they'd seen the cycles such as the advent of email in sales, the advent of the CRM. They themselves saw the reality of usage and adoption. So let me give you a quick little stat and story. We're about 3-4 years into social selling. So I invent the keyword, I pioneer this category 2011, 2012. It wasn't until 2015 where I stopped having sales qualified meetings, where the very first question was, why should I get my sales professionals to use LinkedIn? Why would they even need to do this? Why don't we just keep cold calling? So that's 3 years in. I'm going to come back to that part of the story. So on our board of advisor committee, Jill Rowley is on that committee. Now, she was there during Salesforce, she's like 10th employee in Salesforce. And she joins Eloqua. And she is part of the marketing automation revolution, the very beginnings of it. And she told me this crazy stat that 15 years into Eloqua's existence, they had something like 1 or 3% of North America's marketing penetration. And then she joins Marketo. And even to this day, 20 some years later, after the advent of marketing automation, there is still a vast majority of companies that do not use marketing automation versus use marketing automation. So that's a 20-year gap. And I couldn't help but stop thinking about this as Jill used to tell me this story. I'm like, yeah, but Jill, that's a different pace. I mean, we're now into social selling. So social selling, I invent this word 2011, early 2012. And at that time, I'm user 20 million on LinkedIn. I get on LinkedIn in 2008, okay? By 2012, 4 years in, I'm user 20 million. Now it's at maybe 50 to 100 million. I see the ability to use it, the usage and utility could be there to use it for prospecting. For the next 3 years, every subsequent meeting, we're talking hundreds of thousands of sales professionals in every major software company in the world, the highest early adopting industry and vertical you could imagine. We would be at a sales kickoff, and then we would deploy learning in a learning management system. And at that time, for the first 3 to 4 years, we are setting up 25% of every seller on the planet is still getting onto the platform for the very first time. The other 50 to 60% have almost never used it outside of using it to get their first job as a resume. And then there's very much this Pareto's law that had been experimenting with it and starting to get usage and utility, but they hadn't turned it into a process. 2015 to 2020, we are now deep into social selling. No longer are the sales qualified meetings actually asking the question, the why. It's more of, I heard we need to do this. I need to change things up. We need to become more digital. How do we do it? And we are teaching the very beginnings of redoing social profiles, to sharing content, to using it to build total addressable market maps, to look for signals, to build account plans. Okay. And then COVID hits. 2008, I'm the first member. 12 years later, now if it wasn't for COVID, which created an accelerant at which people needed to jump on LinkedIn, that's 12 years later. Now we're in 2024. 2024, we are still having this conversation. Google Trends, Amar, my business partner, and Pipeline Signals, and I looked this up. And in Google Trends right now, social selling is trending higher than any time in its history because you have 4 years of sellers who've been working from home. They haven't been classically trained. They are now just becoming modern digital social sellers for the first time in their careers. We're talking about 16 years later. So let's bring this back to artificial intelligence. So there is the thesis that AI will very much have Moore's law. It will double every month in capacity and power, and it will get exponentially cheaper. All of this is true as per social and as social media did in the years 2010s. But the problem is the practicality. The practicality is that the human being actually needs to utilize these tools. They need to first understand, why am I going to change? What's in it for me? Number two, they need to actually sit down and learn these skills. So mindset transfer, then it's skill set. Like, how do I do prompt engineering? And then I need to learn the toolkit. And right now, it very much like in years 2012 through 2015, there was a social media tool that came out every day. There was Periscope and Meerkat, and I tried to learn them all. Google Plus. So there's a million tools. The average seller can't figure out where to spend their time. So what do they end up doing? Is they get frustrated. You first had to go through mindset. Now you have to go through skill set. And then you got to choose toolkit, and it's too overwhelming. So now here's where practicality sits in. And this is the problem. And this is why I do not believe AI will be as prevalent as the sales community thinks it will over the next 5 years, because it hasn't factored in adult learning. And I've been in adult learning my whole life. And I have seen that the reality is, this is why at Get Leverage, we're giving sales support agents to customers. Our sales support agents are learning AI. And they're taking what used to be the human being a 5x labor arbitrage because they're offshore. They're now becoming a 10 and 20 times labor arbitrage because in my business, my gross margins improve because my teammates are able to do more with those tools. But it's the North American BDR, AE, CSM, sales leader, chief revenue officer. They do not have the time, energy, inclination to actually learn, how do I actually master this prompt engineering? How do I take advantage of these tools? I'm going to just show you something. I'm going to share my screen. And this is also, I'm kind of testing. Lately, I've been noticing there's been a shared screen issue going on with Restream. This is a form of artificial intelligence, a tool like Clay. So we are identifying the domain websites for oil organizations, okay? Hundreds and hundreds of them. So the artificial intelligence has all kinds of Clay agent tools and parameters. Think of these as like, this is pre-built prompt engineering. Now, I want to double check on the live that in fact I am sharing my screen appropriately. I'm going to come back to this. So it is sharing. Great. Okay. So you see the prompt engineering. But the problem is, as this information comes into the dashboard, about 30 to 50% of it was not quite correct. So it did about 50% of the 900 oil organizations we needed to find, it was correct. And then we had to jump in and actually fine tune, and by hand, a co-pilot had to go in and do quality assurance to make sure that the newsletters, see, you can see website verified false versus website verified true. So the original machine didn't get it right. So we had to go in and we had to capture which was right, which was wrong. Another example, prospecting on LinkedIn. There are tools that allow you at scale to be able to do all kinds of campaigns that allow you, and this has prompt engineering built in, to connect with people, to share messages, to do emails, to do invites. This is an incredible AI-based tool that allows a co-pilot to be able to engage people as you, the founder, as you, the managing partner, as you, the chief revenue officer, to help you book meetings or drive people to events and so forth. But it still requires a co-pilot because you do not have the time, energy, inclination to actually have the follow-up conversations and all the other details that goes with this. That's the important piece, is all of this engineering with AI appears on the surface like it's really powerful. But when you get substantively diving down, it's like any other technology. It requires an immense amount of enablement. And if you are actually going to do that enablement, then unfortunately, you have to take sellers out of the field to master all of these tools. And this is a constant education, no different than social media became for sales. So that is my rant. My prediction is, and you have an inflection point as a sales leadership, you're going to go through the exact same curve: early adopter, early innovator, early adopter, kind of standard operating procedure, late majority. This is a 10, 15-year horizon. So your question is, do you make every AE, CSM, BDR on your team wildly proficient in all these tools? Or do you realize that you can have a co-pilot master these tools and accelerate the work and the outcomes for your sellers? That is my big thesis. That is the big thing that I'm noticing after watching this go through history. When I was 32 years old, I was convinced the whole world was going to be social sellers in 12 months. And in fact, I used to be scared out of my mind that I thought that next year I would wake up and everyone would know social selling and all the curriculum would be free, and it would be, and I used to tell this was like in our business plans. This was the Black Swan event where a light switch would happen. But I always had to remind myself this is absolutely no different than marketing automation and CRM adoption. This is going to be a decade plus long curve. Now put the right people in the right seat to be able to utilize AI on behalf of you, rather than trying to teach 50,000 tools to your sellers. You'll have poor adoption and utility, and you will have gotten nowhere fast. So that's my rant on AI. Hope you enjoyed.